Back a little bit. One of the key goals for any high school coach and basketball team is to go to state. And you did that at Jefferson. We've talked with Gordy Casper about this a little bit. Give us your thoughts on that team when you look back now on it. I mean, that had to have been a great moment in your coaching career. And I looked at the stuff on the IHSA. You had some really big kids that year too, man.
We had everything that year. And I think that team gets lost because it was the last team that from our area that went down in the 2-class system. And shortly after that, changed to 4 classes. And the last team to go down there in place, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And, we could do, what Auburn's been able to do the last couple of years with their perimeter guys. We could get out and pressure like that. But what we had that I don't think anybody else around here has had in a long, long time is the ability to cover up those mistakes with 2, sometimes 3 shot blockers around the rim. So, you could get guys like Josh Pickens and Brandon Fisher and Mike Relaford out there pressuring the perimeter and just really going after steals and just hassling people. And if they got beat, you had Robert Eppinger at 6'7" and Pat Nelson at 6'10", just sitting there waiting to block that shot. So I think defensively is where you got to start with that team. They were extremely difficult to score on, and just a lot of special talents there with Robert and Pat Nelson and Josh Pickens was just outstanding his senior year, and Brandon Fisher, the point guard, I'd put him up against just about anybody in the area as far as his talent level goes and his will to win. Brandon was a competitive kid, and just a really special group, and it's fun. It's one of those groups you get the opportunity to get together with them every now and then, and it's just got a different feel to it than any other team that you've had in the past.
And I think so many people have gotten used to the 4-class system now. I don't think people look back and realize, how big of an accomplishment that is, even taking 4th place in that setting because, depending on how things fall in a 4-class system, you guys might have been in a situation where, maybe you could have won the whole thing depending how classes shake out.
I look at the list of players that were down there that year, and I tell people this, Brother Rice was down there with Bobby Frazier. He was a North Carolina commit.
Yep.
Chicago Crane was down there with Sharon Collins. He was pretty good at Kansas.
Yep.
We got beat by Glenbrook North and John Shire, who did nothing but win back-to-back titles and then go start at Duke for 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we lost to Downers Grove South in the 3rd place game, and they had a couple kids. Elliot Engelman wasn't played at Butler, big post player, and then Brian Mullins was, I think, Defensive Player of the Year in the Missouri Valley a couple years in Southern Illinois. There's a lot of talent down there. You know, when you get. I think we rarely get the 8 best teams down there.
Mm-hmm.
We get the best 3A teams and the best 4A teams. And I usually look at that tournament most years in 3A, and I think, okay, there's one team here that can play with these 4A teams.
Right. Yeah.
And 3 who probably really couldn't. And so I think we've watered it down. We've gone from having the 8 best teams to having maybe the 5 best teams down there, or 5 of the 8 best teams. And so, yeah, the talent is diminished, and it's showing in the attendance down there for sure.
I looked at all the stats on that tournament and your season altogether. We talked about Lee Lampley from Boylan being one of the best players to come out of this area. I think Robert Eppinger could be right on that list. When I do my homework on him, that kid could play.
Robert was so good. And I heard Gordy with you guys last week or 2 weeks ago talking about the Rob touch rule on offense, and certainly we had we kind of ran an open system where we ran a motion system, and we charted 2 things: how many touches Rob got, and what our percentage of or our points per possession were when he touched it versus what it was when he didn't touch it. And we charted something we called lane touches, and every time the ball went in the lane on a possession, after that you could shoot it. Anybody could shoot it, and those kids really figured that out and bought into that and did a phenomenal job with it. Rob's a kid who he could handle the ball at 6'7". He was probably 260 back then. He was, I've seen him recently. He looks great. He's lost weight. He's in great shape. He's a kid still had a little bit of baby fat on him as a junior, and was
me too, Mike.
As an athlete. Yeah, I've heard that about you, Dave.
Looking back, historically, I guess, not to say, this team's better than that team or whatever, but, a lot of people talk about the Auburn team because that's recent. A lot of people talk about those Boylan teams, which just seem to live downstate in the 90s. A lot of people mention the Guilford team. They obviously go back to the West teams. This team just doesn't seem to be there. Where do you think this team kind of stands? Do you think, this team could have competed with some of those other great teams that people seem to talk about more?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you what, I'd love to get them all back in their primes and their high school heydays and throw together a tournament if that were ever possible. And
right.
That's what makes sports so great is in your mind you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think they could play with any of those teams. I really do. And you compare them to Auburn's recent success. Obviously, no matter which team you match up, you look at certain guys and think, man, they're going to be dominant no matter who they're playing. Like a Fred VanVleet.
Right.
Obviously, his talent is phenomenal. We would have a tough time matching up with him. I just wonder how some of those other teams would match up with us in the post, and our guards being very capable of playing with a Fred VanVleet. I'm not saying they're as talented or anything like
right.
that, but could hold their own against him, and I don't think that would be an overwhelming matchup for some of those guys. And then I just kind of wonder, how they guard the post in those situations.
Mm-hmm. Before I let you go, this week they found the body of Antonio Little from South Beloit, a great basketball player. Didn't you lose a player in kind of a tragic way that played on that Jefferson team as well?
I appreciate you bringing that up. We've actually lost two guys.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler McCasman was actually one of our managers on that 05 team, and he's a kid that transferred from Boylan to Jefferson. And Tyler died in a car accident the summer right afterwards. And the kid was getting up at 5 in the morning. He was working for his uncle's cement company, I believe it was, and 5 in the morning he's driving and he got into a car accident and somebody crossed the center line and so Tyler died tragically in that crash right afterwards that summer. And a few years ago, back in November, Brandon Wright was shot and killed, and I think his murder is still on the loose. So sad. Had a great 10-year reunion with those guys last February, and we played at Jefferson. They did a nice little halftime ceremony for us, and got to see Brandon's mom and dad, and get them out with us afterwards. And certainly it's something we're dealing with in Rockford. It's tragic. I've heard nothing but great things about Antonio Little, and it's just sad to see. And I don't really know the whole story with Antonio. I've heard nothing but great things about him, and certainly prayers go out to his family.
Well, thanks, Mike, so much for being on today. We love talking about the good old days, and that was a good old day for you. And we'll keep in touch, okay, buddy?
All right, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
We've been talking to Mike Winters, former co-worker here.
Yeah, he worked with us. And I've heard a lot of good things about the Boylan program coming up this summer. They've done some good things. I think they've got some young players coming up that maybe people don't know about. I think it could be a big bounce back year for them. I know Auburn's done some big things the last couple years in the conference, and I think they'll still be right there. But, I think it could be a big year for Boylan.
I think Tom's telling me that we talked too long, but we had a good time, Tom. Is that okay? We'll take a break. We'll be right back and probably have about 2 seconds to talk to you here on the State Line Sports Hour.
Hey, this is Greg Saunders, your host for the